You're performing right now, even alone. You are not the same person in the shower and in a meeting. One of them is performing, and the strange part is, most of us no longer know which one is real. This constant performance doesn't just happen in public. It begins to shape the way we experience our own minds. When the audience moves inside the mind, something else begins to change. The stream of our own thoughts, the one that was always there, starts to feel different. William James once described the mind as a stream of consciousness, a current that never stops moving. But we often build dams in that stream. We interfere with it. We try to control it. We filter what we let others see. And eventually, without noticing, we begin to filter what we let ourselves see. The persona doesn't just face outward. The filter we built to manage what others see doesn't stay facing outward. Over time, it turns inward. And when we begin filtering what we allow ourselves to feel, the stream doesn't disappear. It just has nowhere to go. That pressure is some of what we hear in the quiet. The noise in the quiet isn't random. Some of it is the echo of a performance that never fully ends. Carl Jung had a word for the self we present to the world. He called it the persona. The word comes from the Latin term for the masks worn by actors in ancient theater, objects that signaled to the audience who a character was, what role they played, what was expected of them. Jung's insight was that we do the same thing, but invisibly, and from very early on. We develop a persona in childhood, shaped by what earned approval, what avoided punishment, what made us acceptable. It forms around us gradually, like a second skin we forget we are wearing. So slowly that we stop noticing it is there. And that is precisely when it becomes a problem. Because a persona, worn long enough, begins to feel like a face. We forget it is something we put on. We begin to believe it is simply who we are. And when someone or something threatens that image, the reaction can be surprisingly intense. Not because our values were challenged, but because our performance was. Researchers who study self-presentation have found that managing how we appear to others draws on many of the same cognitive resources as other demanding mental tasks. It requires monitoring, tracking how we come across, adjusting in real time. It requires suppression, setting aside reactions, feelings, or thoughts that don't fit the version of ourselves we're trying to project. And it requires consistency, maintaining a coherent identity across different contexts, even when those contexts pull in very different directions. This is not a small amount of work, and yet most of us do it all day, every day, without ever naming it as work at all. Psychologists have long suggested that self-control draws on limited mental resources. Managing how we appear can quietly drain them. Choosing the right word so you don't upset someone, swallowing the reaction you actually felt, holding a smile that doesn't quite reach you. We call this social life, but the mind registers it as work. And like any resource, it can run low. The ego is never truly idle. It is almost always performing, managing, maintaining, and the cost of that maintenance is something most of us feel long before we find a name for it. We know this feeling intimately. It is the relief of finally being home, the exhale when you close the door behind you, the slightly different version of yourself that only certain people, or no one at all, ever gets to see. The tiredness that arrives at the end of a long social day, the desire to simply be without having to present anything. That tiredness is not weakness. You're not tired from life. You're tired from performing it. It is the reasonable result of sustained effort. And yet, if the persona is a construction, something shaped by other people's expectations and our own desire for acceptance, then something else must have existed before it. Jung believed that many people spend their entire lives living almost entirely in the persona, mistaking it for their full identity. The psychological work of maturity involves learning to distinguish between the two. When the persona is too rigid, when we invest too heavily in a particular image of ourselves, we become fragile in a specific way. Any threat to the image feels like a threat to the self. Criticism lands harder, failure feels catastrophic, and the applause when it comes never quite feels like enough, because what is being affirmed is the performance, not the person. The goal is not to destroy the persona. We need it. It allows us to function in social life, to be legible to others, to meet the world on shared terms. But to hold it lightly, to know it is a role, not a soul. The backstage self, the one that exists before the performance begins, is harder to describe. It appears in small, unguarded moments, when you're absorbed in something you love and forget to monitor how you appear. When a conversation opens unexpectedly and you say something true without planning it. When certain people make you feel not evaluated, not observed, just met. Those moments are not accidents. They are brief returns to something that was always there, waiting beneath the role. If you'd like to begin noticing this, not to fix anything, just to see more clearly, here are a few places to start. The next time you feel that particular tiredness after a social situation, you might pause and ask, which part of me was working hardest in there? Not with judgment, just with curiosity. Notice the moments when your voice shifts, when your posture changes, when you choose a word not because it's true, but because it's safe. These aren't failures, they're information, quiet signals about where the performance is heaviest. And if the mask tries to pull you back, if that quiet voice shows up, telling you to be productive, to perform, to become someone again, try something simple. For a moment, don't fix anything. Don't improve anything. Don't become anything. Just notice what it feels like to exist without performing. Even for a few seconds. Nothing breaks. And if you find a space, even a brief one, where nothing is expected of you, try not to fill it immediately. Let the performance rest. Notice what, if anything, remains when the audience leaves the room. A mask worn long enough leaves a kind of pressure on the face. You don't always notice it until it comes off. So as this moment ends, take a breath. Not the breath that prepares you for a performance, the one before that, the quiet one, the one that belongs only to you. Be still and let the face beneath the mask finally rest, because the truest parts of you were never meant to perform. They were meant, simply, to exist.